Hello and welcome to Off My Shelves, and in this episode we're going to be looking at House of Penance, the library edition by Peter J. Tomasi and Ian Bertram, and yeah, we'll get underway. So House of Penance is one of the many Dark Horse books that we've been looking at through the month of July. As you probably already know, I won't keep going on about it. And I was first attracted to this not by Peter J. Tomasi, who I've read quite a lot of, but by Ian Bertram's artwork. But before we get into the details of all the book, as ever, we look at the build of the book. So it comes with a dust jacket, and underneath the dust jacket is full art covers from the original books when it came out as published originally, because it came out originally as 6 smaller issues, and on the back is one cover of one issue and on the front a cover of another issue. It's library edition size, so a little bit bigger than your deluxe edition, a little bit smaller than your absolute. You know the drill by now. The binding is great, as you would expect with Dark Horse, like I always say, sewn binding. It's a thin book, so there's no real problem with kind of get the loss or any issue really, and it's a really well put together book in general really. There's no complaints from me whatsoever. So yeah, to the story now. The story itself is based partly in historical fact, but then it takes that historical fact and builds a fictional story around it. So it's based around a woman called Sarah Winchester. Now Sarah Winchester in reality inherited from her husband William a fortune from the Winchester Rifle Company. So she owned most of the shares in that company in the late 1800s, and basically was one of the wealthiest women to ever live, essentially, and certainly one of the wealthiest women at the time with ease. But she was full of grief and loss, because the book only mentions her husband William and her daughter Annie dying, but she also had a great many other losses, like the loss of her mother and father, all around the same time in reality. She is the main focus of this book. What broadly happens to Sarah in the book is she believes she's kind of cursed, and she's cursed because of her dealings with the Winchester family, the creation of this Winchester rifle that had killed so many people. She believed it was kind of karmic retribution, the fact that her husband and her daughter had died, and she believed that she was still being plagued by the spirits of the people that had been slayed by the Winchester rifle, so she had to make a penance for that in some way. And she visited a medium, and the medium told her that her house in San Jose, California, she needed to build and extend and keep building it and extending it to appease the evil spirits really. And that's kind of what the book broadly is. It's following Sarah's story in this obsessive, compulsive way of her building and building upon this gigantic house. Again, in reality, the house does exist, and it's a tourist attraction in America now. And back in the day, it had over 160 rooms, and she spent well over $5 or $6 million at the time constantly building it. Whether there's historical fact in the fact that she never ceased building is irrelevant to this story really, because the story does take a lot of liberties with this kind of supernatural ghost story, horror story, because that's what this is essentially. On the other side of this story, Sarah, extending this building, decides to employ a team of builders around the clock, and the team of builders she brings on site are all criminals or old army people or damaged people, people who have been murderers and cutthroats and killers, and essentially they are attracted by the offer of well-paid work, well-paid construction work. But when they arrive on site at a mansion, they've got to give up their weapons, and they've got to basically dedicate themselves to her rules of the house, which is no weapons, no killing, nothing like that, just constantly building day and night. And one of the main kind of characters you see set up early on is an ex-sniper from the army days, from the Civil War days, and his name is Warren Peck, and he basically has a choice of which road to take, and he chooses to go towards this constant incessant banging that he hears, because he was attracted by that sound and he felt that there wasn't any other choice. So he wanted to find out what was going on, so he went down this road and ended up at the Winchester house. He's met by all these other various people who have kind of committed themselves to be part of the building team at the Winchester house. But essentially he's going there to die. He's been stabbed and wounded, and he's going there to die. But he doesn't die. he basically takes on the cause of Sarah Winchester, and a lot of the people in the story that take on the cause of this building almost kind of buy in and believe Sarah's quest, that they are in some way guilty of murdering, or in some way basically their penance is to build this house and to keep these spirits at bay, really, because they have added to them. They've killed and have so much blood on their hands. And so the majority of the people that are there on the construction squad really do kind of have faith in what Sarah's doing and give that over. In reality, I should say as well, there wasn't this team of ex-convicts or ex-army people or murderers building the Winchester house. In this story, though, it gives another angle to the people coming there and making penance. So it's not only the people like Sarah and her family who manufactured the guns trying to appease these spirits, it's the people using them as well as trying to make penance, which is where the book gets its name, obviously. So as the book goes on, and as I mentioned, it's only 6 issues, and the oversized art is fabulous. And again, as I said in the beginning, that was one of the main draws for me. One of the main draws was not the amazing writing of Peter J. Tomasi, but the artwork by Ian Bertram. Now, Ian Bertram, I was first kind of introduced to his artwork in Little Bird, which was published by Image Comics. I'll grab that now, actually, to show. Yeah, this book right here, Little Bird, The Fight for Elders' Hope. Now, he did the artwork in here, and that is a really great book if you ever get a chance to read it. I'm sure we will look at this on the channel at some point, certainly. But that's where I was first introduced to his artwork. And so when the opportunity to have a library edition of this 6-issue miniseries came up, I jumped on it, and it was super cheap, to be honest. I think I paid about £14 for it on Books, etc. I don't know if it's still that price now, but it was amazingly cheap. And the artwork certainly is the standout thing. The story is fine, there's nothing wrong with it at all, but it's paced very gradually and it reveals itself very slowly as well. And one of the things that it really kind of balances well is the fact that, is this house haunted by these spirits, or is this all a hallucination by Sarah? Is she gone mad, essentially? Because you see in various panels, the ghosts are not ghosts necessarily. They're more like a malevolent kind of presence in the form of worms, bright red worms that kind of creep in and around people and through the house. And only now and again Sarah can see them, but they're always kind of there, creeping up and peering and wrapping around people without them realising a lot of the time. But they are the kind of ghostly presence and the supernatural presence in the book. So you don't necessarily see, you know, your typical spooks and spectres and all that. It is a bit of a different take on a haunted house, really. And the artwork, a lot of people, I'm guessing, with the artwork, it's going to be quite polarising, I think, the artwork, because I think Ian Bertram's artwork is one of those styles, because he is like all the great artists, to be honest, like Mike Mignola, like Frank Miller, like Jim Lee, that he's got a style. You can tell his artwork straight off the bat. You know, he's got these very over accentuated eyes and heads, and different body parts are shaped in different ways, but it's quite unique to him. And for a horror story like this, because it's so dominated with violence and freaky scenes and hallucinations or proper hauntings, he kind of shines, really, because his artwork very much is this bridging gap between beauty and grotesqueness. He really bridges the gap between the two and sometimes goes one way over the other. At various points in the book as well, there's kind of conflict between the different people that are on the construction site, and there's different weird things happening, like animals dying or people being killed. And so there's this whole kind of inner turmoil within the Winchester house. But then Sarah is always there trying to push these guys forward to make sure they stay focused on constantly building and adding and not stopping at all, never ceasing the hammering and the construction work, because if they do, then she has failed. So she really is constantly pushing to make sure that the work never ceases. But equally, it's very difficult, obviously, to maintain that when you're in a totally grief-stricken, depressed state, and you're trying to corral a bunch of very hard-edged, murderous people all around you, really. So yeah, it's a really interesting book. There's a lot of interesting dynamics going on, I think. It definitely never says whether this is all in her head or whether this is actually happening in the book. The book kind of lets you decide, really, almost. And even to the point where these big, large-scale things happen and you think, well, that's it then, that's definitely, you know, a proof that this is not in her head. after they finished, they give a more grounded explanation as to what had just happened. But certainly if you like horror, ghost stories, then this is probably going to be right up your street, and I would certainly kind of give it a look, particularly if you can pick it up for fairly cheap, because again, for what I paid for it for £14, it's well worth that really, and I don't think you kind of will pay much more for it really in many places, but it's certainly well worth a look, just from an artistic point of view more than anything. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed having a look at House of Penance, and I will catch you on the next one.